to our session today on business continuity management. I am Pallavi Banerjee and I take care of marketing for the region which is Middle East, South Asia and Australasia. Now, we have two esteemed and distinguished speakers with us today, but before we begin and before I introduce them, just a few quick pointers. First, we will share the recording for this session. So I know through the session, we keep getting a lot of questions where people are asking, would we get the recording? Would we get the presentation for session? So the answer is yes, we would be sharing the recording for this session after the webinar today. So you should be getting it in your email within 4 or 5 days. The second one, please, all your questions, please submit in the chat window. You will be muted by default on this platform, so you won't be able to speak out the questions. So please submit your questions in the chat window and our speakers will answer them at the end of the webinar during the question answer round. And the third thing is that after the webinar, you will find a really quick short survey with 3 questions only. Please fill the survey. It will help us plan future webinars for you in a better way. So thank you so much for that. And let's move on to introduce our speakers for the day. As I said, distinguished speakers. So first is Hussein from LRQA. He's a senior auditor with us and he brings a wealth of knowledge on business continuity management systems. So Hussein, thank you for joining and welcome.
Thank you.
Second, we have Simon Williams with us. He's a lead business continuity management for Abu Dhabi Commercial Bank. Again, it's a privilege to have you with us, Simon, today. Wealth of knowledge. I will not really go on with the introductions because both of them, their designations and the way they speak today, you will know how knowledgeable they are on the topic. And over to you, Hussein. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pallavi. Good morning and good afternoon for all participants joined us and spend the time for this, and hope this will be engaging for all of us and it is a learning for us too. Thank you. This session, the way it is planned today, we will have an overview of ISO standard benefits, overview of ISO structure and requirements, business continuity operations, BIA and the strategies and solutions, the business continuity management system implementation challenges, benefits of certification, the changes to ISO standard, and the certification process. We'll go through slides. If any question or clarification, please, you can send it. And at the question and answer part, we will review all. First 4 slides is overview of standard and benefits, the ISO structure and requirement. Then we'll focus on business continuity operation, implementation and the challenges and the benefits and the certification process. Now to start with business continuity management. This standard first edition was on 2012 and this is the last updated edition, ISO 22301 2012, and was released on October 2019. Generally, the ISO 22301 sets out how an organization can set up and manage and improve the business continuity management, get ready for, respond to and recover from any situation that could disrupt the organization normal business. That is the main thing of the ISO standard. So putting the business continuity plans to resume our operation, this is the main or the core of the implementation for the business continuity management system. Now, why do we need business continuity? Of course, the need of business continuity management system is to protect our business from the unexpected. Whether this is from power cuts, fire, or IT system or equipment failure, industrial action, natural disaster, pandemic, severe weather, data loss, network, internet disruption, cyber attacks, different threats. So our system should be ready to resume operation at acceptable capacity levels. And of course, a number of events occurred and had an impact on business like COVID-19 pandemic, the shipping container in Suez Channel, breaches or the cyber attacks and data breaches which is still critical for the organizations and need to consider also fire in different places. All these disruptive incidents had an impact on business, and so it's important to have a management system in place to resume our operations. Now come to the benefits. There are many benefits of being certified for business continuity. Mentioning some of the benefits, like protecting the reputation, and this is by demonstrating to interested parties adhering to good practice in business continuity, of course, and bringing customers who have greater confidence on the organization that can provide products and services at agreed levels. Trust, of course, organization can show customers that they are a reliable business partner and are able to restore operation in a timely manner. The cost, which enables the organization to protect their income while reducing chances of further losses. And of course, the compliance with the legal applicable requirement or regulations to meet their requirement. Assure stakeholder confidence and ability to respond to incidents, and ensure the continuity of business operations during disruptions so that business keep flowing and running, and identifying the risks by putting plans and managing them. These are some of the benefits. Of course, there are more benefits, but mainly the reputation, the continue of our operation, managing the risks, identifying the threats, putting a plan to mitigate them. Now, an overview for the ISO structure. This standard was the first based on the high-level structure. Clauses from 4 to 10 are the mandatory clauses, and an overview of the requirement. We'll start with the clause 4, as usual, as like the other standards. The context, identifying the internal and external issues, reviewing strategic objectives to ensure that the business continue to support the organization, considering the needs and expectation and the requirement of interested parties, and being aware, of course, for the applicable legal and regulatory requirement. Clause 5, the leadership, which is important, and there is interaction with all the other clauses. The organizations need the continuous support and leadership of top management by considering the management rules and responsibilities, promoting the culture of continual improvement, allocating responsibility for performance monitoring and reporting, and their support should be evidenced in the implementation for the management system. Planning. Here it is related to organization risks and opportunities, identifying the actions to manage the business risks, and determining the objectives and establish the effective change management. This is the main requirement of planning. Support, determining the business continuity resources and the competence management, identifying organization rules, potential rule changes due to organizational change. This was added in 2019 also. Improve the employee awareness, internal and external communication process, and of course, managing the documentation. These are the main requirement or overview for the support. Operations, in the next slide, we'll discuss the main elements of it. But in general, here we determine the business continuity priorities or critical activities, determine the requirements, dependencies, the risk, and how to address them. This is the operational risk. In clause 6, it was focused on the organizational risks. Here we have the operational risks that can have impact on the critical services. Strategies and solutions for running the business, having response structure and procedures for dealing with the disruption. Clause 9, the performance evaluation. Let's say we have a mechanism for monitoring, measuring, and evaluating the performance, involving the management in monitoring the performance and effectiveness of the business continuity management system. And improvement, clause 10, having the procedure for monitoring the performance and improving effectiveness and benefiting from continual improvement of the business continuity management system. This is a quick overview for the requirement. As I said, this standard was the first based on the high level structure, And in the new change, there is no major changes in order to keep it meeting with other ISO standards. Now, business continuity operations, this represents clause 8, as I mentioned, and as an overview for the requirements, starting from operational planning and control, where we plan, implement, and control the processes needed to meet requirements. Risk BIA and risk assessment, it's mainly for analyzing the business impact and assess the risks. For disruption to determine the critical activities. The outcome of BIA and the risk assessment is to enable the organization to identify the business continuity strategies and solutions for protecting the critical activities in clause 8.3. Business continuity plans, here setting the plans for continuing, resuming, and recovering the critical activities in clause 8.4, and mitigating, responding to impact, and developing an incident response structure. Exercise and testing, of course, for business continuity procedures and arrangements cannot be considered reliable until it is exercised. And finally, we have in the evaluation, this is the operational review of documentation and capabilities, evaluation of plans and procedures, and the documentation and the exercise and testing, mainly for the operation, as we have also evaluation in other clauses in clause 9, but this mainly for the operation. Now, business impact analysis as part of operation to focus on the BIA and then the strategy. One of the key important things of the ISO standard. In BIA, we assess the impact of not performing the activities due to any disruption in order to determine the critical activities. As an output also, we determine the recovery time objective for resuming the activities at the specified minimum acceptable capacities, and determine the MTBD, the maximum tolerable period disruption, or a maximum acceptable outage, which is the time it would take for impact to become unacceptable. The type of impacts we have: financial, reputational, operational, legal, contractual, and business objectives. Just to give an idea, these impacts should be included in our BIA, but of course the organization can determine other impact which is applicable. Some they can include like safety, based on the type of the business. For financial, it is related to losses due to fines, penalties, or lost profits. For reputational, it's the negative opinion or brand damage. Operational means the impact of the disruption to the flow of operation, the impact on process KPI results. For legal and regulatory, it's related to litigation liability, withdrawal of license to trade. Contractual means the breach of contracts or obligations between the organizations. And the business objectives, it's the failure to deliver on objectives or take advantage of opportunities. And of course, for each type, we need to determine the thresholds of impact that are not acceptable. The business continuity strategies and solutions. Now here we have 3 scenarios the business continuity planning must address: the location, people, and system unavailability. For example, for threats like fire, earthquake, power failure, natural disaster, terrorist attacks, all leading for a scenario the location unavailable. For the IT system or equipment failure, data loss, internet disruption, and cyber attacks, it's for the scenario system unavailable. Pandemic, workforce stoppage, transportation blockage or strikes, this is for people unavailability scenario. Because to perform an activity, we need the people, the location, the system. So we need to consider that to identify the scenario and then put our plans in place. Loss of vendor scenario, if applicable, And here, this leads to the development of strategies to meet short and long-term unavailability, because one of the threats is the supply chain. And recently, in the last year also, many organizations faced this as an impact. Strategies could be activity relocation, resource relocation or allocation, alternate process, and temporary workaround. For each strategy, we need to determine the business continuity solution, and it can involve more than one solution. Like for relocation strategy, the solution could be alternate staffing, network redirection, emergency transport, and it could be extending working hours. So based on the scenario, based on the type of activity, we can determine the strategy required. And then we need to determine the solution, at least one solution. More solutions can be also determined if required. Now come to implementation challenges. Processes followed for analyzing the business impact analysis, BIA, and for identifying the RTO and MAO, considering dependencies, internal and external. As a challenge, in BIA, we should assess the impact over time of not performing the activity or providing the service due to any disruptive incident. Now, in some cases, we find, or the organization, they did the analysis and they consider that the activity at this location is stopped or not continued, but it is running from the other side. So there is no impact. And this is not correct. This assumption needs to be considered in our strategies and solutions, not in the BIA. Another point, in some cases for the impact type, not all the impacts determined, and also related matrix not defined the thresholds with the rating correctly. Another point is how to set the RTO and MAO. As explained, the recovery time objectives is for resuming activity at specified minimum acceptable capacities. So we cannot set the RTO at high impact, like 4 or 5. Like in the scale from 1 to 5, we select the RTO in the high impact. And because our objective to resume the activity at the acceptable levels, and we didn't reach the maximum acceptable outage. Another thing is not considering the information and data, the recovery point objective, the suppliers. So these dependencies we should consider in our business impact analysis. Determining the strategies and solutions, incomplete or unclear strategies, like what we did. If we did not cover applicable scenarios and strategies and solutions, how we ensure the continuity and resume the activities. If we included location and technology and availability in the business continuity plan, but didn't include employee unavailability, and the disruptive incident was related to pandemic, for example, the workforce stoppage, how we can continue then. So all the scenarios we should consider in our plan to determine the required strategy and recovery. Another point here is we determine the strategy and the solution, but actions, how to implement solutions, not determined. Another point as a challenge, the back to normalcy procedure, how it is determined, or it could be not clearly documented or not mentioned at all. So it's a requirement that we need to back to normal in a safe manner, and to resume the activities as it was running normally. Exercise and testing to validate over time the effectiveness of business continuity strategies and solutions based on appropriate scenarios. Never testing the BCP as a challenge. If we have a plan, we need to test it. Some of points is we do tabletop review, but no actual test being carried out. Here we cannot assure the effectiveness of the plan, and part of the test is to practice it, and if any issues raised, to take action and improve our continuity and improve our preparedness. Another point is we do the test, but it covers only the response to one of the emergency types. But how did we continue critical process after our response to emergency scenario not determined? The same, how back to normal, not covered in testing, as it is important to ensure back to normalcy for the operation in safe manner. Post-exercise reports that contain outcomes, recommendations, and actions to implement the improvements. We need to keep evidence which critical process included in the tests, especially if we have included all critical activities in one BCP. Now documenting actions followed in the exercise to invoke the BCP and conduct the test with time it took for each action. So we then be able to measure the time required to resume activity and compare it with the activity recovery time objective. So it's required these details to be determined in the post-exercise report, the actions and the time it took to resume the activity. So we can measure the actual RTO with the set or the determined RTO. Who took part in the exercise and if there is evidence of all key personnel being involved, such as deputies. Of course, because they need to know their roles and responsibilities. And as this is part of awareness requirement, conducting tests without their participation will not be helpful if an actual scenario happened. Organizational change affecting roles and responsibilities. When organizations have restructured and did not consider roles and responsibilities of business continuity team and competence required, it's a requirement to plan changes that affect the whole business continuity management system. And this is the main focus were added in 2019 version. Resources, the equipment, suppliers, contractors, emergency contact. As mentioned, the resources need to be determined to support resuming critical activities like people, facilities, and work locations, information, application, finance. So all these resources we should consider. These are some of the implementation challenges. Now, the advantage of certification. In addition to benefits mentioned earlier, certification is an opportunity for the organization to determine that its business continuity is still functioning and ensure product services are covered in the scope based on changes that happened. Of course, with time, we can face different changes, adding a new service. So we need to ensure this is part of our business continuity management. Also ensure the business continuity system continues to be compliant and effective, and the business continuity management continue to improve in order to meet its purpose. In our external audit, we review the effectiveness of implementation for management system and how the organization works together to keep services going, how they learn from the conducted exercises or incidents if occurred, and interview the team to evaluate the awareness on rules and responsibilities on what to do if faced with an incident. So this is a benefit of having a certified management system. COVID-19. COVID-19 pandemic, how business continuity management system helped the organization in this pandemic. Now, certified clients during the pandemic were able to guarantee the continuity of processes and services as remote work strategies were in place. The strategies followed work from home, increased work hours, alternate people, and it could be other different strategies, but mainly the work from home and increased working hours, alternate people. Due to pandemic, the impact on the organization business was in some cases applicable for the scenario location unavailability, in some cases the employee unavailability, and of course having the business continuity and plans and procedure in place to ensure continuity in such scenarios helped the organization to continue their operations. And because of pandemic, most of organizations decided to implement ISO standard to have in place effective management system and business continuity plans to continue its operations, as their procedures and plans developed was limited to remote work and did not consider other scenarios or possible threats. Now come to the changes. I didn't mention the changes at the beginning because now the changes from October 2019 and now we are in November 2022. The transition is up to April 2023. Most of the organization, let's say, they completed the transition, and of course others are in process to complete. But just to confirm, the structure of standard has been reviewed to make it easier to implement, providing more clarification of what is required. The terminology related to business continuity also have been simplified and modified. There is no major changes. For leadership and commitment and management commitment has been merged in one clause. And this is made more simple. For risk, clause 6 focus on how to manage the business risks, and clause 8 remains focused on operational risk associated with the critical processes, as I explained. Change management, the changes remains part of business continuity operations and focus on controlling planned changes. The new clause adds the requirement to plan changes that affect the whole business continuity management system. Competence, they emphasize on potential rule changes due to organizational changes and consideration of competence after disruption incident. For strategies and solutions, no changes. And as discussed on previous slides, what are the different strategies and solutions can be used in our plans. Evaluation of capabilities, also no major change. The review and evaluation is part of the operation clause 8, as explained before. Now, certification to ISO 22301. LRQA is accredited certification body. We can say the process started from sending request and provide required information. And based on this information, we'll get back to you. And of course, training. The clients could start by arranging in-house training to make employee familiar with the ISO standard requirements. Training could be also awareness on the ISO requirement, business continuity management system implementation, internal audit, and lead auditor training. Gap analysis, it's a pre-audit visit to look at the existing management system and compare it to ISO requirement and identify areas to improve before starting the formal assessment, which is stage 1 and stage 2, and mainly identify areas that needs more work. Then we have stage 1 audit. The audit team review the adequacy of management system, review mandatory documents and records as per the ISO requirement, and look at the readiness for conducting stage 2 visit and plan for the visit. Estimated time required for findings also determined. The maximum 90 days between stage 1 and stage 2, usually 30 days to keep enough time to ensure the implementation of the management system requirements. Then we have stage 2 audit. The audit team will conduct audit to look at the effectiveness of implementation, covering requirements by the ISO standard and the organization implemented management system procedures and processes in place. And after passing the audit, the ISO certificate will be issued and valid for 3 years. Then we have surveillance visits during the cycle. A surveillance audit will be conducted on annual basis to review the implementation of management system and the continual improvement process. So I think that with that I can hand over to you, Simon. Thank you.
Thank you, Hussein. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to go through a high-level view from a customer's point of view. Hussein, if you can move me to the next one. Okay, so For us, really, why is BCMS important for ADCB? We're a bank. We are a regulated business. And as such, we have lots of regulators who come and ask us to do things in a certain way and so forth. So the bank, way back in 2012, 2013, considered how best to demonstrate itself. We had information security management system. We had a number of quality management systems as well. And we were very much focused on how we could demonstrate and be recognized for our business continuity as part of our culture within the bank of having a service excellence. So we took the ISO certification 2014. We are now in our third cycle. And obviously as an organization, we would not have kept our management system over 3 cycles. We're coming up for our 9th year. We would not have done that had there been benefit to us. So we found that this was very much what our customers were looking for, whether they be counterparties or customers, just to have that recognition of what we were about, that we would be able to maintain their services, their access to their monies and so forth. And particularly what we wanted to do was bring structure and discipline to our business continuity approach. And we found that answer by having a business continuity management system. So having established this management system way back, what we then want to see is perhaps, well, what benefits do we determine from this? And what we have found is that we have a very structured approach. Business continuity by its nature is very much process driven, as the saying has covered through the operations cycle. So what we found is that this gave us a very structured approach. We have a continuous improvement intent. So one of the requirements of the management system is that you are always looking for that continual improvement. We can't just sit there and say, very good, we've been doing this for all this time, aren't we great? So we're always trying to make improvements. Now, one of the best improvements we can make by having a process-based approach is efficiencies. And we have found by applying our management system and the disciplines from that, that we have actually driven efficiencies through the organization, through different elements of the management system, such as improving our response. So were we to have an incident, can we make that incident, we can't necessarily prevent all things, but we can certainly deal with how we address them and improve our response to them. And we also take interest there from our interested parties, customers in the main. How does it feel for the customer when we actually make use of our business continuity? Customer has driven to the branch, they would want to get a financial transaction completed. The branch isn't available because we've had an unfortunate circumstance, in which case, what's the perception? What's the experience of the customer there? And that's one of the drivers that we're now looking towards as we move towards the 2019 version of the standard, but very much focus on customer feedbacks and how we approach that. The other great thing for us as an organisation is we are quite a large organisation here now in the UAE, but we're now ADCB Group. So we have overseas subsidiaries with Egypt, Kazakhstan, and we also have the digital Islamic banking proposition from Al Halal. So what we've actually done, this management system that we have for ADCB UAE, we actually leverage that across our entire group. So we have this consistent discipline across the whole of our organisation, the whole of our group, and so forth. Yes, as a large company, that gives us some economies, obviously, and it may not be for everyone, depending on the size of your company. But that's certainly something that we have taken, and we've managed to leverage this across our organisation, which is really very good for us. So we've been doing this since the 2014. We've had a very long relationship with Lloyd's Registrar on that basis. I just want to give some thoughts to, what do a Lloyd's Registrar do for us in that sense? So I would very much see them as a trusted partner. They are really quite good guys. They come and they have assessed the organisation across our different management systems. And we have actually found that to be a very good relationship with them. Hence why we have maintained our management system throughout this period. So that's very much what they give us, is that very good trusted partner. They see the way that we've implemented on the design of our management system, and they give sort of guidance, whether it be conformity assessments or perhaps just some suggestions of improvement that we maybe can take on and consider as we again look to that continual improvement plan. The other thing that they provide us is an independent assurance. It's not me sitting in front of my leadership saying our business continuity is pretty good. What we actually have is an independent assurance that our business continuity has reached the requirements of the ISO certification, ISO 22301. And that's a very important thing, having that independent assurance for us, particularly when we have requirements of regulators such as the Central Bank of the UAE, who require us to have conducted independent assurance procedures of our approaches. So very good opportunity for that. We've also taken advantage of Lloyd's Registrar's trainings. We've done a number of training events with Lloyd's Registrar to build up our auditor community, whether they be team auditor levels or even lead auditor levels. And a number of the team that perform lead audits within our organisation are actually multi-qualified across the management systems, whether they be the BCMS, the QMS, or even the ISMS. So that really has provided us with a very good centre of excellence, which we can then take benefit across the organisation. So that's very much how I would see our aspects with Lloyd's Registrar. The thing for us as well is that as a company, we have to always look for these efficiencies. And that is the main thing that I would say that we do receive from our management system. The discipline that it gives us and that economic and efficiency plan really has provided benefit, and that's why the organisation continues to support the BCMS within the ADCB, UAE, and we have the same practices across the group. Thank you. So that's what I would like to bring to everyone's attention. The same.
Thank you, Simon. Pallavi?
Yes, thank you so much, Hussein and Simon. So it's now time for question answers, and I'll be taking one question at a time. Before that, there's a 2 minutes time. I'll be taking you through the next steps. Whatever questions you have, please start sending us on chat. Okay. So next step, Simon and Hussein have graciously spoken about the standard, what it details, how you should be looking at implementing. For those who are new to it, or for those who are planning to implement it in their organizations, what are really the next steps here? So you can visit our website and you can check out the basic free resources that are available on business continuity management. You can request us, if you want at all, for a gap analysis to check where your systems are and are your systems actually ready for certification. Or you can also get in touch with us for basic introduction courses to lead auditor courses in a variety of formats like e-learning, virtual classrooms, and face-to-face classrooms. So there is help available. Just get in touch with us and we will be more than happy to let you know what is more suitable for your organization in what stage you are at currently. And to summarize in 1 minute, why you should or why you could be coming to us is LRQA is issuing more than 50% of the top 200 Financial Times global index companies. So when you are certified by LRQA, you are certified by one of the most leading global industrial accreditation bodies. We have worldwide presence, more than 48,600 clients, more than 120 countries, blah, blah, blah. But the important bit for you is that our auditors, our assessors who come to you are global standard, the technical capabilities unmatched, and something that we pride on. So thank you so much for that. And let's move on to the question answer round. So Hussein, the first question we have today is, what are the methods or ranking mechanism to prioritize the business continuity priorities?
Yes, that depends on the organization how to define the criticality for the activities or prioritizing the critical activities, which is the critical, let's say we have the impact matrix and we have the different pillars for defining the impact, financial, reputation. Based on that, we determine the recovery time objective. Let's say on a scale from 1 to 5, we have, if we set, once we find the medium impact, here we will put our RTO. After we determine all the activities recovery time objective, some processes could be 1 hour, some processes could be 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. Then it's the management decision or the organization to decide which activity will be considered as critical. Let's say 5 days and below, it will be critical for us and need to be continued. Or it could be 1 day and below, it is critical for us. Now, this is one method. Another method, it could be after they determine the critical activities, which should be continued if there is any disruption, they determine the priority. The priority, they determine like if they have any major impact or catastrophe impact in the impact matrix for that activity, it will be considered priority 1. If there is any medium impact found, only medium impact, we didn't reach to high or very high, that will be priority 2. So like this, they can follow their own criteria to determine what are the critical activities. And if they want to determine the priority 1, 2, 3, maybe they will have 4 priorities or 5 priorities, and then they decide for priority 1, 2, 3, which is the highest priority, we will consider these are critical activities. So based on the PIA, based on the impact matrix, after we define the recovery time objective, we can set or prioritize the activities.
Thank you so much, Hussein. So because you just spoke about PIA, the next question is somewhat related to that. It says level risks from ERM, will it serve as an input to BIA?
See, maybe I didn't get the question. If you can repeat.
Sure. The question says level risks from ERM, will it serve as an input to BIA?
Once we conduct the BIA and we have the activities, we can determine the risks related to those critical activities, but no need to consider the risk while we conducting the BIA or to determine the critical activity. Maybe if I make it simple, just consider that the process or the activity is stopped or not continued due to any reason. And once we determine the recovery time objective based on the impact if this activity not continued over time, we can determine what are the threats or risks that can have impact on this activity, and we determine the controls to mitigate the risk.
Thank you so much, Hussein. Thank you so much. Okay, the next one is, what is the difference between BCM and ERM? Which comes first? That is ERM the bigger umbrella and BCM comes under it, or it's the other way around?
I can say first we need to respond to emergency. So if there is any emergency happened, we need to ensure the safety of our lives, the team, the employee. So we need to respond to the emergency. So that is the emergency response. After the emergency response, we can decide, should we continue? So then will come the business continuity. I found that in some big organizations where they keep the ARM as the umbrella and the business continuity will come after responding to incidents. And this is, of course, by the standard they mentioned. First, ensure the safety of our staff. And then if we decided to continue, we'll invoke our business continuity plans.
Thank you again. So we have a very interesting question. It says, what are the common NCR that you observed as a trend in the companies that implemented BCMS?
Testing, exercise and testing, It is the highest one. Why? Because some organization, they do the emergency response and they didn't continue to show us how they test their business continuity plan. Of course, it is effective exercise they conduct, but it is mainly for emergency preparedness, for example. Others, it could be like missing information. And this is one of the challenges which I mentioned in the slides. In the report, we didn't mention the actions, how it is implemented, or just we do the tabletop review. So that is the most or the common NCR we found in our audits, exercise and testing.
Thanks again, Hussein.
Thank you.
So maybe this one is more suited for Simon. Simon, are you there with us?
Yep.
Awesome. So Simon, there's a question which says, in some organizations, BCM is part of InfoSec, and in some others, it's part of ORM. Which is the right approach?
The answer I'm going to give is a personal view. And unfortunately, I would also go a little bit historical with this reply. So way back in the beginning, information security did include by default business continuity, because that was the early days of the disaster recovery back in the 80s and 90s. So since then, the disciplines have matured and separated. From that perspective, operational risk is also a newer discipline than business continuity management. So by way of subject matters, there is a relationship between the two. So in information security, by availability of information asset, it does consider business continuity, albeit perhaps more an older view of disaster recovery. Operational risk under the Basel categories does consider business disruption, although it focuses again more on system and natural disasters and supply chain issues. There is no right place, wrong place, I think, for business continuity in an organization. It all comes down to the corporate sponsorship of the subject. I've seen business continuity perform for a global event in the City of London in 2012, and it reported to human resources. So I think there is no right place, wrong place for business continuity management in an organization. It totally depends on the sponsorship, the management airtime that it is given for its matter, whether it sits in information security or it sits in operational risk. It's entirely down to the organizational design. But the subject must be able to perform. And if it's not able to perform, it doesn't matter where it is in the organization, it will fail its main purpose, which is keeping the business continuing.
Thank you so much, Simon. Thank you so much. Just one last question for you, Simon. It says, how do you determine the acceptable level in BCMS in an organization?
Okay, this acceptable level, there's many probably different aspects to that question. I'll take a few in turn. The main one is what we call the contingency mode of operation. This is also known as the minimum business continuity objective. So this determines what level your business continuity will be performing against. You've determined your recovery objectives, recovery time, recovery point. You've determined your maximum tolerable point of disruption, your maximum allowable outage, but you need to determine, well, functionally, how good will my business continuity be? And that's your minimum business continuity objective. You can do it as a percentage of resources, how many resources are still performing the task. Doesn't quite work that way for the technology, because you can have another server that's maybe not as powerful as the first. It will still get the job done within your recovery objective, it just won't be as good. So there are different levels to how you could measure that. The other element is it comes down to the company appetite. So the company can choose its recovery objective, it can choose how fantastic its business continuity management system can be. If we want to take the analogy of the car, you have a choice. You can drive the Lamborghini, or you can drive an electric, something different, or you can even go down to a smaller car, much more economical, perhaps something like a Tida. Other cars are available, I'm just using it as an analogy, but that will still be a car going along the road, and that can be your BCMS. So it's entirely down to your corporate appetite as to whether you want a really good one or a minimum one. We just want to do something slightly different. So there are different elements to that question. Hopefully I've tried to answer both aspects. Hussein, any views to that one?
Yeah, clear. Your answer is clear. At the end, it depends on the organization.
So, Hussein, last question for our day, for the webinar, really. It says, BCM teams mostly rely on business inputs for filling BIAs. How important do you think BCM team to have business knowledge to validate BIAs, especially the impact profile?
So the question on the employee BCM team knowledge to validate the BIA.
Yes, I can repeat the question. Yes, just a sec. It says BCM teams mostly rely on business inputs for filling BIAs. How important do you think BCM team to have business knowledge to validate BIAs, especially the impact profile?
Yes, now the team, when they do the review for the BIA, they need to have all the required data for the previous time to determine the impact. So validation of business impact analysis processes should be conducted on annual or yearly basis. Organization, they can determine less time to validate their BIA, and to ensure it is correct, they need to have the test for the outcome of the BIA, which is the objective, the recovery objective, testing the recovery objective, and they find whether it was meeting the requirement or not. Now, also information is, of course, it's important, because based on that, we can determine the impact for not performing the process over time. Like if we said there is a legal impact at 2 weeks, but there is no legal impact at 1 week. So we should support our analysis with evidence for that. So the information is required, and it's a continuous process to observe and monitor our BIA.
Thank you so much. So that was our last question for the day. Thank you for a wonderful session, and thank you for everybody who joined us today. It was wonderful having you for the webinar. As I said, there will be a quick survey that will pop up right after this webinar ends. Please answer it. Simon, once again, thank you so much for joining us today. It was indeed a pleasure to hear from you. Till we meet again, thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Have a great day, great evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.